Good morning, everyone, and very much welcome to another Flash Friday. Very happy to talk to you today on the 2nd of July, 2021. And we're in the midst of a time where we see that COVID measures are very slowly fading away, and people are really, especially also with a bit of nice weather, really ready to go out there again and explore the world. Country borders are fading away as well, normally with a lot of checks or required vaccinations. As we see that the vaccination rate is going up, we see that people are becoming much more open. And of course, the holiday period is coming close. So everyone's ready to travel. And from that perspective, it's really nice actually to make a little bridge to my guest today, which is Rooijmans from Tranzer. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, great to have you on board here. I think it's definitely a time when people start to think about travel again, that we can actually dive in a little bit more into what travel actually looks like these days. And if you talk about mobility, I think Tranzer is in a really nice spot there to play an important role in facilitating that. So I'm happy to have you on board. What I'd like to do, especially today, is figure out a little bit on the role that Tranzer plays in the mobility world. And how we see the world of payments and mobility evolve together. Could you start with a little introduction, perhaps, on what Tranzer does and how you ended up there?
Yep. Thanks for the time and the possibility to speak. But Tranzer started from frustration. I think it's 6 years ago. I had to fly to Dublin, arrived at the airport late in the evening. The next morning I had to go to a client. And what you do at the evening at 11 o'clock, you look at the Uber app and see how much time it will take and how much effort, how much money. But I was going to speak to a public transport operator, so I would like to use his buses because otherwise you don't have a good story the next day. So, and if you have an excuse to take the Uber, you would do so. But then, it's really difficult. You look at Google Maps, then you have to download the local app. There was no local app, so I had to go to the bus stop to buy the ticket there. I said, why don't we just push the tickets into Google and buy the ticket directly? And I prefer to do everything in one app. So click, look at all the differences and buy it. It wasn't possible. So at that time, I already had a company. I talked to my partner, said we're going to hire developers and build something ourselves. And we're going to conquer the world with an app. And now it's called MaaS, Mobility as a Service. But after some time, we find out that building the app is not the difficulty, but linking all the operators. And all those different systems are agnostic. They're all huge legacy. So we start combining those, creating one API and offering that to all the MaaS providers and to all those front ends like Google Maps or 9292 or other front ends that are willing to sell tickets. And we will deal with the complexity in the back. And that's what we're doing at the moment. And it's growing really, really rapidly. It's fun. It's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of difficult stuff.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people have been also. Probably the frustration is quite recognizable for a lot of people. At least I know as well that I always find it really hard if I want to travel from A to B, that I have to figure out how to cross each leg basically by different means of transport. And I'm not even talking about getting the payments done in the meanwhile. And so, what's the key to that? Do you think? What's the success? Because I think a lot of parties have been talking to each other as well to figure out if they would actually, collaborate on this at this level. And it's always been very hard, right? So, what's the key to success there in your view?
I think we just started, and we were ahead of the wave of MaaS. So the moment all the MaaS companies popped up and they created their own mobility as a service app, and Google is looking at it to integrate it. We already connected several of large operators. And I mean operators, Dutch Railways or Deutsche Bahn, SNCF, so the French.
Yep.
And we go from the intercity networks, local, into the cities, and then we're starting to link micromobility. And I think it's just hard work because a lot of systems are not going to have the same payment system, not having the same validation systems. Because it's really, from my background as a lead architect from the smart card system in the Netherlands, I know how difficult it is to implement the system. And if you say, let's have the conductor just put a new app on the phone, it means that we have to instruct 12,000 people how to put a new app on the phone. And then they have to know when they encounter with a customer, which app to open to do the check. So that's mission impossible.
Yep.
So you want one system for the conductor in the front and all the complexity in the back. And that's what we start dealing with. And that's it's fun, and it's helping the customer to make it easy. And I really believe, that's my strong belief, if you make it as easy as possible for the end user, and they always see how much time it will cost, how much effort it will cost, how much money it will cost, and how much CO2 it will cost, in the end they will choose what's best for them. And sometimes it can be CO2, sometimes it can be speed, and sometimes it can be money.
Yep.
And often ask the question to somebody who flies to London quite often. You have a lot of those business travelers. Yeah, I always fly on London City. And then I ask, how do you go into the city? Yeah, I take the cab. And that for me means that they don't travel that much, because if you go to city, you take the DLR, you take the public transport. Nobody takes the taxi, or you take your private helicopter into the city, or you take the DLR. And there's not much in between. And then you want to know that solution. And a lot of people that go there not that often don't know it. That only costs you £3 to go into the city, and only 12 minutes.
I think indeed, from that perspective, a cab is still sort of a default option for a place you don't know that well, right?
Exactly.
Let me just get into a car. They'll know where I need to go.
Yeah, exactly.
But what's interesting, I think, because I think you also mentioned, for example, integration with Google, right? I think, especially if you look at the financial industry, I think there's a lot of fear sometimes actually to collaborate with a platform like that. But on the other hand, I think if you talk about mobility, let's say I couldn't go anywhere without it these days, because it's sort of the entry point to your understanding of the geography on where to go. How does that work? How easy is it to work with them, for example?
Yeah, we're not integrated yet with Google. We are integrated with the biggest competitor of them, with Move It. Move It has, I think, more subscribers than Google Maps. It's mainly used, not in the Netherlands, mainly used in the rest of Europe and North America. And we're talking to Google to integrate with them. It's difficult with both of them, because they don't want to have many failures. They want to do it first time right. And I understand, because 0.1% failure means 30 or 40 people in a call center to deal with all the stuff you screwed up.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're very strong on the process onboarding you, and it will take quite some time. But when you're in, it goes very quickly. So we first in the Netherlands, now we're linking Germany, we're talking about Belgium, now France, and it's going very rapidly.
And so, do you see that? Do you have like basically actually connecting all the basically mobility providers and the whole payment transaction infrastructure? Is that actually what's not going to be their cup of tea? I mean, do they feel comfortable when actually using a service provider like you for that?
Yes, and it's what we have done. We have split our service into 3 services. So we have linking to all the public transport APIs, to the tariff systems, to the ticketing systems, and to the micromobility. So we have one API for all the public and micromobility. Then we have one API that's only a payment gateway. So there we link to invoicing systems. We do the clearing and settlement, and also to all those PSP like Adyen, Molly, etc. But we're also linking to fuel cards, for example. So we can directly debit from the fuel card, and they can debit it into the invoice. So if you, for example, use multi-tank card or travel card, you can directly pay for your fuel, but also use one of your preferred apps to travel, and you can pay with that also. So that the end customer only will get one invoice. And if you travel between Utrecht and Antwerp, that ticket will be directly debited from your invoice. And I think this is, and the third part we have is the mobility ID. It means that we need to be sure that you are the person you say you are. We work with other partners, with AWS like Amazon for face recognition. We do checks on the driver license to be 100% sure. And it needs to be done, because otherwise Green Wheels or other suppliers won't hand out the car if we don't know for sure.
Exactly. No, for sure. I think especially there when you talk about liability, right? So if someone else uses your car to jump into a train, it's not so sensitive, but taking away someone's car, is becoming a bit more sensitive.
Much more expensive.
And so I think it's interesting also to talk about why we talk about this in the Dutch context, right? And I think you have quite some experience in sort of looking at digitizing the user experience there. Can you tell a little bit about that? Because does it make the Netherlands a good playground to actually build a system like this and, let's say, be a large player in the mobility world?
Yes, I think so, because it's normally when I started in 99, 2000 with closing the ticket officer for Dutch Railways, then we started to make it more digital, like with the smart card, the over chip card system. And when we start doing it, we're one of the first and the only nation, you can ask if it's good, yes or no, but with one system for the whole country. So you can travel with one card from A to B, check in, check out. There are still a lot of flaws in that system, but it functions for 98%. It does it really well, and people know how to work with it. Yeah. And that normally opens a lot of doors for me if I go internationally. If I go to the UK or the rest of Europe, they're impressed with what we have installed or developed over the years. And now that will be the base moving into EMV. So you can use an open bank card just to tap on, tap off. And if you want more discount, then we go to a more hybrid form of closed loop EMV systems.
Yep.
And what I see is Netherlands, they are give space to develop it, because you need room for errors. You need space to make mistakes, to say, okay, this doesn't work. We have to try a different angle. And I see in the more Asian countries more difficult. There's no space for any mistakes.
Okay.
And that's different. So I know. And if you move to the States, for us, it's really difficult to find investors in the States, because they're normally Tesla oriented and not that public transport oriented. Or you need to be in the East Coast, and then there are more investors because there are bigger systems like MTA, New York, etc., etc.
Yeah. And so it's quite geographically, basically the location really matters from that perspective, on also the perspective that people have on the chances of such a system, as well as how far they are ahead with their electronic, basically the digitization of the system. Let's say, do you think that also, let's say, because I think the OV chip card basically, I think, gave us a head start, but at the same time, you saw also, for example, that in the UK, they moved faster ahead when you talk about, for example, using your credit card or bank card for travel, right? So do you see that the Dutch are sort of catching up again to that kind of trend right now?
Yeah, it's in the UK. It was a really funny story how they did it, because they had the Oyster card, similar to the OV chip card. Then they had to replace the readers. And the mayor of London and the minister of transport, they were in a kind of battle, because transport in London is the only thing you can compete on. And so the mayor is really keen to do something successful. And they invested, I thought, 1 million extra 8 or 9 years ago for EMV reader. And the minister said yes. And that was more or less the big takeoff for EMV in London. The problem now is that it's quite expensive for them to run the whole system. And what you see is that the rest of the UK is not digital. You still have to buy tickets, or you buy a ticket online and then you go to a TVM on Gatwick or a Heathrow, and you have to put in your credit card number, and then you being exchanged and you get your ticket physically still, because you need the Max Stripe ticket to go through the gate. Otherwise it doesn't work. And now, step by step, they are moving to QR code. And that's something I see, is that the long distance train probably will stay on QR code. High volume, low distance, or small, short distance, low value, that will go onto EMV if it's possible. And in London, what you see, they probably migrate to a kind of hybrid system where it's more closed loop, so they don't have to push all those low value transactions to an expensive system as MasterCard or Visa.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so do you actually, because I think that also was interesting, right? So I think you could, all these little transactions, you could actually turn them into small payments, but you could actually also accumulate them and go for, let's say, larger payment amounts, right? So I think that's currently, I think that's still more appealing to do, right? To basically create a layer in between.
Yeah, and that's a good question. That's what you see. It's being in London, all the transactions are being aggregated. And then kept at a certain level. So the customer won't pay more than 3 times a single trip, for example. And only once at night the transactions are being pushed together and then pushed through to the higher aggregation level, onto the clearing level with MasterCard. So to save cost. And I think that's a common way to do so, because if you have to settle every transaction, it's very costly. It's only 5 cents or 10 cents, but still on a euro or €2 trip, it's quite a lot of money.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so, where do you see? Let's say, I think I didn't hear you yet about air travel, right? So, for example, do you think that that's something that we at some point will also see in these kind of combination, or will it basically be an exceptional way of travel?
I think if people travel and it's more frequent and you can make that decision in a split second to take the train or the car or the bike, then it can be highly automated, EMV, QR, make as simple as possible. The moment you go into longer distance, like airlines, long distance trains, it needs to be more yielded. And that means that the seat will be sold against the right price. And people also want to make that choice, not the last 2 minutes, but they need some time to make that choice. So normally they are going into a reservation system, Skyscanner, and look for the best price and book it. And if you are not price sensitive, then you travel first class, you pay the best price, and you can sit in first class or a business class or whatever. So I think those tickets are still, and the volume is much lower on those lines and airlines than public transport. Public transport is really high volume if you compare it to airlines. It's very simple. The speed of a gate needs to be around 25 persons a minute. So imagine that you push at a gate at an airline 25 people per minute through the gate. That's mission impossible. But in a station, you need to do that. And even it becomes higher. For example, I love it in Japan, they leave the gates open because it's too slow to open and close them the whole time. So they leave them open. If you not have a valid ticket, then they close. You get hit by the gate. It's the other way around.
No, exactly. It's also a good way to approach that, indeed.
Yeah,
interesting. I think that's and so from that perspective, do you encounter a lot of let's say, also habits that people have in different nations on how to travel, for example?
Yes. And it's also states related, because I often look at London. London is really close to mainland Europe. London. What you see is huge developments. One is that public transport in London is being seen as a necessity. It's not being seen as something not for the elite. Because if you go to London, you see the Range Rovers, the Porsches, the Ferraris on those bigger stations outside London, and those people take the train and the subway into the city. And there are only a few that will take the helicopter, and the rest will take public transport. Nobody. And it has to do with congestion fee, it has to do with time, it has to do with certainty, it has to do with money. And that's something I believe we will see more and more also in mainland Europe. And what I also copy from the UK is that they are running into capacity issues. It means that they can't build any more infrastructure because Thames and Crossrail, it's completely, if you've been into London, it's completely full. Sometimes you have to let go 3 subways before you can go onto the tube, onto the next train. So it's really completely packed. And what they're doing now is using the pricing mechanism to try to get people a little bit early, a little bit later. And this is something we will something you can expect in the future in Holland also, is that we don't have the money anymore. We just have to spread to people better during the day. And I think something what COVID teaches us is that it's possible. If you can work a little bit at home, you can go a little bit later, a little bit earlier, just change your behavior a little bit. And sometimes people need to be helped a little bit by just pricing it a little bit different. So if you ask me, I really, really hate products like annual tickets. You pay 7,000 euros and you can travel whatever you want. It's like, I also hate all you can eat restaurants, but that's a different story. But it doesn't bring the best in the people out. It's really
So I understand that. And so do you facilitate that as well, so that you basically work with dynamic pricing with Tranzer?
Yes, we are talking to the PTAs. Those are the public transport authorities. So they give the assignment to public transport companies. And we work with those to discuss how can we help you and enable you that for you it's more flexible if you use this EMV group. If you use this EMV group, that is cheaper or better, or we can special discount, or you use this huge group of travelers. We can offer them something special, and not like the student card in Holland, just a flat fee. No, more subtle, more. And if you use a little bit later, for example, I always give the example, it's very complex, but if I take the train as a business traveler, my biggest problem is not the price. I also want to have a parking spot. So if I arrive too late, I don't have a parking spot anymore.
Yeah.
So we should think about premium parking spots where I'm willing to pay a little bit extra. And it's all possible with the payment system and how we work. So we work, for example, with Parkbee, you can make a reservation. So
the same goes for reservations as well, right? So I think you need some, let's say, quite some people that don't want to take the train do it because they don't want to stand for half an hour or an hour. So they want to have a seat reserved, just like a parking spot reserved or something like that. Yeah.
And this will change, and this won't happen overnight because we are talking to dinosaurs. You know, so it will take time, but you see the change is coming, and we are just enabling it and speeding it up.
Yep. I think it's a really nice game because I think you're really close to the customer experience and how you see that travel is changing on that side. And at the same time, indeed, you work with the larger infrastructure providers and players that you have to somehow get at one table and have a shared vision on where things are heading.
Yep.
So what is your big next challenge then, Paul? What do you think?
My biggest challenge is to getting the right people in. And I think that's everybody's company's challenge, isn't it? Is that there are two big challenges. One, getting the right people in. And because we are getting some growth, we are growing, we are becoming bigger, we're getting numbers, we're hitting the numbers, so the investors are happy, we are happy. So now we opened offices in Berlin, Paris, in Verona, that's Italy. So we opened several offices. So for us, France, Germany, and Italy are really important. With those three countries and Holland, we have, I think, almost 60 or 70% of Europe. And now we are adding Austria, Swiss as a kind of, okay, that's nice to have. It's easier.
Yep.
That's my, I think, to get the right people in, that's key. And we are succeeding on that side. On the other side is that we need to have also some influence on policy. And I see that's happening also. And I'm always using the same example from Antwerp. They have a really clear vision. If we want to keep this city livable, then we need to make it more clear that all the micromobility like steps and bicycles, they're allowed to park, but against some rules. You know, everybody must be able to integrate them. Like Uber, you're not the only one. If Uber wants to ride taxis in Amsterdam, they need to open up their API so others can integrate it, because otherwise they start monopolizing the whole city. And it's the same for Lime, for example. You know, if you put Lime somewhere out there, it's perfect, or Jump or whatever, you're allowed to do so, but they need to be integrated also into the other apps, because otherwise it's only using public space. And it's the same for the public operators. They also need to open up a little bit more, because I had debates with several large operators, and they say, for example, with Deutsche Bahn, we have the best app. Everybody is using our app in Germany. I said, do you have any competitors? No. I said, maybe.
Maybe it's not the app, right? Yeah.
But they never can build such a good app as we can. I said, now maybe you have to open up a little bit. And I really believe that I don't want to go to Deutsche Bahn for a ticket. I don't want to go to NS for a ticket. I want to go where I am already. So if I have a Volkswagen and I have the app on my phone, I park the car, click, and Volkswagen is arranging everything, the mobility for me. Click, then the ticket, click. So that's why we're really proud to have Panook as an investor, because strongly related to PON, a huge automotive. And I think that's for us the future. Automotive. The other future we see is banking. We see that several banks outside the Netherlands are very innovative. For example, the KBC Bank in Belgium, they integrated mobility into their telebanking or the internet banking app. So the moment you go into the internet banking app, you can buy tickets from the public transport in Belgium. They're the biggest reseller of tickets in Belgium.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know why, but it's like, okay, I trust you with my money. I trust you with my mortgage. And now I want you to arrange my mobility. And that's in daily opening of the app. It means every day that people go back to the application of the bank and open it.
That's really interesting indeed, I think. Yeah, for sure. And do you see that other banks are following that example, or at least are exploring?
And normally from the banks in Holland, I get the excuse it's not on our roadmap. We are completely packed, etc. And it's their choice, of course. And I think it's a pity because what I see now is that other institutions like Telepass or the French Telepayage, they already have a direct debit relation with a lot of users from those toll roads. So for the audience, those are toll roads. You have to pay with a small machine in your car, and then automatically money is being deducted from through an invoice or credit card. And they are expanding their horizon. It means that parking garage in large cities, they fit with a small reader. So if you come with your car, whoop, it opens. And now they say, okay, I want to sell mobility. So we're talking to them to integrate. So they're becoming more and bigger. And what they also do is, for example, Telepass went to Milan and they said, hey, I see that a lot of my customers travel to your public transport system. We want discount and we want it like this, this, and this. So it's really funny that I see that shift to complete different players I wouldn't expect before. I wouldn't see it. It's new for me.
Yeah, no, I think that I really like that as well. Indeed, that they're trying these new solutions in that direction. Yeah. And so one of the just more of a personal frustration I still have actually on still mobility is actually the multimodal part, right? So because I think public transport we can plan, car travel we can plan, walking we can plan, cycling we can plan, but the combination is still messed up. Right, so I can't plan to go with my bicycle to a station, then take the train, then take the cab, and then rent another bicycle, for example. It's still too complicated. How do you see? Is that a puzzle we are able to solve? You think one of these days?
Yes, in the future, of course, but you need enormous teams of knowledge and algorithms that can solve it, because all the trips are so personal.
Yeah,
it means that in the morning you take the car to the station because you first have to drop the kids off because it's raining. Now you have so many different variables that I'm naming now, like the weather, the kids, the time you need to be at work. So that's almost, so the time that the algorithm will predict something wrong is bigger than it's right. So it's annoying you. After 3 suggestions, you say, "No, I do it myself." So what you will see is that we first do it in legs. You first plan yourself to the station, then you plan the train from the station. And then if you arrive at the next station, the end station, you want to be sure that you have a bicycle or a cab or a car. I think that's going to be the first step. Yeah. That have the certainty that something is there when you arrive. And in the future, but it won't be us. We only provide the multimodal planners by the best planners in the world. Like we know in Holland 9292, but that's why we work with Move It, because they have one of the best learning algorithms. I always ask, how do you learn? And you see that Google is learning from, they track and trace you, and then they know exactly what you're doing, how long you're waiting, and that's how they update the multimodal plan, and that's Move It is doing the same. So those plans we are using, and then we linking all the tickets to that and the payment.
Exactly. So I know it's not exactly your focus, of course, but I'm just I think it could also really help again boost the use of these planning tools, and for people to actually sort of rethink again their journey from time to time on how they want to travel.
Yeah, and what you see in quick answer to that is what you also see if in London, you're not interested in the time because the frequency is so high. Yeah, you can't be bothered with the planning anymore. You just walk up to the station and you go. And I think that's where we need to go. On the fat routes between stations, so many trains, you can't be bothered with the time. Every 2 minutes there's a train. Yeah.
No, exactly. I think that's where I think we're closing in on that, or at least it's quite crowded already in a lot of on the train network. But still some work to be done there. I think it's really nice. So is there anything particular from a technology level that you're looking out for that you're curious about? So I think you basically now it's mostly about using EMV for identification and then the transaction settlement. But so what's next? You think?
I think we are agnostic, and it means that. For example, Deutsche Bahn have QR codes, and they will use for the coming 10 or 15 years because they have 6,000 stations, not going to change the equipment overnight. That will cost them billion.
Yeah.
So EMVs for some bigger cities, we will use it. I'm really looking into EMV closed. So it means that we can have special capping, tariff systems to try to move people from the peak to the shoals. I really believe there will be a huge behavioral change. So that's what we're looking and we are using and developing. And the other one is, for example, GPS tracking. So if we just follow your GPS and then you get the invoice. But the problem with that is that I can't reflect you upfront what it will upset you in CO2 or price. And I really think that the mobile is so important, because then persons can see, you as an individual can see, okay, if I take this route, it will cost me this much. And if I take this route, and I think this is something we can do much more, that people getting more aware of what their impact on society is, on the money, CO2.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So basically, real-time insights in the impact of their choices, basically. And,
exactly.
I think that's really interesting. So I'm looking out for that as well, Paul, because I think we're running out of time already here. But I would definitely keep an eye out for that, because I believe it's a really interesting field that's highly in development now. And it's wonderful to see how Tranzer is helping out, basically doing the open transport node, basically, that everyone can use. So thanks for joining me this morning and explaining on how your vision on the transport mobility as a service, I should say, world. Great that you could join, Paul.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was wonderful to have you. And for everyone who has listened in, thank you very much for joining. We're looking forward to keep in touch with you. And of course, we'll see you again for another Flash Friday next week. It will be the last one before a little summer break. And for now, I just wish you a great day and a great weekend. Have a good one.